Hey guys, my name's Jamie Gregory. I'm a fourth year nursing student at MacEwan University, and I'm going to present today on 3,4-methylene dioxymethamphetamine, otherwise known as MDMA, ecstasy, M, or Molly. This presentation was made for the Streetworks staff within Edmonton, Alberta, and will take about an hour and a half with all the videos. I know MDMA is not our specialty or even the most commonly seen use or commonly seen drug within our setting. However, I did notice a few presentations that requested information on MDMA use and harm reduction strategies. I have also talked to one or two clients about MDMA, and I thought this is a knowledge gap that I could help fill. So this PowerPoint was made with the purpose of educating staff and perhaps offering information that could be combined with other presentations when educating on party drugs. Streetworks was invited to a high school, and we were also invited to educate staff at a Soundwave event. One of the students at Streetworks from the U of A expressed that when she was in high school, her entire graduating class had tried Molly. This is a piece of anecdotal evidence, nonetheless evidence of the growing need for harm reduction education on illicit substances, and I would argue MDMA being the most common of those substances among teenagers and young adults. Knowing that fentanyl is out there and the city's drug supply has gone toxic calls for this information to be combined with harm reduction and naloxone training. Streetworks has a plethora of information on various harm reduction strategies to educate clients, ranging from safer consumption, staggering usage, making a plan, or taking care of your body. This PowerPoint could be used to help educate staff when questions about MDMA come up, and how to help healthcare professionals when providing education on reducing harm for our clients who choose to try MDMA. Some learning objectives for today. So learners will have an introductory knowledge of the history of MDMA. We will discuss international drug treaties and prohibition, what MDMA is and its effects, differences between MDMA and ecstasy, MDMA in the media, risks associated with MDMA use, novel psychoactive substances, polysubstance use at raves, harm reduction for individuals and businesses. So let's get right into it. The history of MDMA. MDMA was first patented by a German pharmaceutical company called Merck. The purpose of its creation was unclear. Some studies say that it was to suppress appetite, while others indicate it was an attempt to create a blood clotting medicine. However, it was never used or marketed for either of those purposes. The drug was shelved for several decades following its creation. In the 1960s and 70s, it was rediscovered by pharmacologist and chemist Alexander Shulgin, sometimes called Sasha Shulgin. He began testing MDMA on himself and others, eventually introducing it to many therapists around the country to be used during psychotherapy sessions. He claimed that MDMA could promote empathy, which helped their clients deal with issues such as bereavement and marriage problems. Next, I would like to show you a short video on Alexander Shulgin, as he is well known among those who experiment with MDMA as the father of MDMA, and it's important for us to be familiar with what our clients have learned from him. This video is focused on MDMA specifically. However, Shulgin went on to experiment with other versions and compounds similar to MDMA, such as something called 2CB.
The stepfather of Rabe's favorite pharmaceutical lives in the hills behind San Francisco. In the early 60s, Dr. Alexander Shulgin was one of the Dole Chemical Company's top analytical chemists. He turned his skills to making psychoactive drugs. It cost him his job, but turned him into a folk hero to the Rabe generation. In the mid-1960s, he resynthesized an obscure drug that had been patented but then ignored by the German company E. Merck in 1911. It was called 3,4-methylene dioxy and methylamphetamine, MDMA for short. It would later acquire the street name ecstasy. To Dr. Shulgin, it was just one of hundreds of mind-altering drugs he concocted and tested on himself and his close friends.
Actually, it's about 40 years ago. I started with a drug that is an isolate from a cactus called mescaline. And it was an 8-hour experience. My curiosity was if such a simple molecule can allow me this type of openness, the so-called psychedelic experience, what modifications that molecule will modify, improve, change, redirect that type of introspection. And hence that became my research search. Ah, magnificent. This is my first effort to make the product, and I have starting material and product left.
Today, in his garden shed laboratory, Dr. Shulgin is synthesizing what he hopes will be a brand new psychedelic substance. In the weeks to come, he will try it in larger and larger doses and assess whether or not the trips it will produce are worth taking.
I rather suspect it would be a visual distortion, maybe color exaggeration, wiggly lines, moving patterns. I would not expect it to rob you of awareness of your reality, where you are, and your relationship with it.
Around 20 years ago, Dr. Shulgin made these careful notes. The first recorded experience on ecstasy.
This is one of the early studies on MDMA. I called it N-methyl MDA at the time. And let me get my glasses so I can read. Here they are. 16 milligrams. That was in 1976. Actually, the first trial in that particular guise was on a train trip going from here to Reno. There was a thing called the Fun Weekend, the Fun Reno train, and I went with my late wife and 2 very good friends, and we very often would take our own meals with us, and we'd eat on the train with the fun of having a tablecloth and a candelabra and lox and all the pleasures instead of a sandwich. And not at all uncommon, we did then have a martini or an alcohol as a prelude to dinner. And I asked if they would mind if I tried the chemical in its place. 25 milligrams, no effect. 40, no effect. 60 milligrams, no effect. 81 milligrams, I got a +1. 53 minutes, smooth shift into a light intoxication. Distinct, almost early alcohol-like intoxication. And I'd find that I would blend very nicely into the gregariousness, into the disinhibition of the cocktail hour. So I looked upon it as a possible low-calorie martini, or no-calorie martini.
Dr. Shulgin mentioned the drug's effects to a therapist friend. He and others were enthusiastic. They felt its ability to induce friendliness and empathy would be ideal for treating people with relationship problems. Dr. Shulgin believes thousands were given the drug, often by qualified practitioners, until it was banned in America in 1985.
So in the 1980s, MDMA was branded as ecstasy. It increased in popularity as a recreational drug in the electronic dance music or the rave scene. In 1985, MDMA was banned in the US and placed on the Schedule I list of banned substances. It was defined as having significant potential for abuse and no medical applications. Possession of MDMA could result in 7 years imprisonment, and trafficking or production could result in a life sentence in Canada. The UK also placed MDMA as a Class A drug under the Misuse of Drugs Act in 1977. Despite this legislation, trends in use continued to increase into the 80s and 90s. So, from Candy Kids and Ecstasy to outdoor music festivals in Mali. MDMA use began to decrease over concerns about its purity in the 2000s. However, its peak in use was in 2001, And in 2004, 14% of young adults aged 18 to 25 reported lifetime use. In 2014, overall reported use had increased from 11 million in 2004 to 17 million in 2014. It was back as the new it drug and rebranded as Molly. Bringing this back to a more local level, Edmonton used to have after-hours clubs such as G-Spot or the Y After Hours. The Y is still open. Edmonton's EDM scene has actually grown, and many nightclubs do host raves or electronic dance music events, including Church of John, Starlight Room, Union, the Shaw Conference Center, Encore, Ellerslie Rugby Club and Mossy Productions, the Y After Hours, Plur, or Soundwave at West Edmonton Mall. International drug treaties. International drug treaties are a series of international agreements that have been ratified by the majority of member states of the United Nations. A single convention was held in 1961, which aimed to unify older international drug policy agreements by applying similar policies to the three major illicit drug classes derived from plants, namely cannabis, coca, and opium. In 1971, the Psychotropic Drug Treaty included synthetic psychoactive drugs such as opioids, amphetamine-type stimulants such as MDMA, sedatives, and hypnotics. In 1972, there was an amendment to the Single Convention, and in 1988, there was a convention against illicit traffic of narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances. It banned the trade of chemical substances used to manufacture scheduled substances. So in other words, they banned certain chemical substances that were used to manufacture substances or used to manufacture scheduled substances or the banned substances. It formalized how the drug control treaties have been interpreted by many members since 1961, namely that member states were required to criminalize the possession, use, manufacture, and sale of prohibited drugs, while allowing for their legitimate use for medical and scientific purposes. The goal of international drug treaties was to protect the public health and societal well-being by reducing the harmful use of prohibited drugs, and to facilitate access to these drugs for medical and scientific purposes. The international system has been criticized for failing to prevent non-medical use and failing to provide access for medical use. International drug treaties and prohibition. Treaties have been used to justify enforcement and incarceration of a large number of drug users or execution of low-level drug dealers. They have increased the harms experienced by this population through the spread of HIV and AIDS infections, drug overdose deaths, and imprisonment. Critics of prohibition suggest reform and legalization. MDMA, LSD, psilocybin, or magic mushrooms are less commonly used than cannabis, but more than opioids. Legalization would allow users to be better educated and reduce harm caused by their use. Legalization reduces structural barriers to healthcare and treatment and decreases social stigma. Naysayers to legalization express fear that if legalization were to occur for all drugs, more people would participate in use and an increase in risk of the adverse events due to that use. Claiming legalization may change the characteristics of users and their pattern use. Prohibition versus harm reduction. So harm reduction policies focus on public health and aim to minimize harms associated with drug use, versus prohibition, which focuses on abstinence and punishment. Prohibition creates a lucrative black market, whereas harm reduction strategies tend to be more cost-effective than criminal justice. There are direct benefits for individuals' ability to rehabilitate and contribute to society and community health. Prohibition deters people from accessing health services and seeking help, whereas harm reduction encourages help seeking by reducing fear of criminal sanctions, decreasing social stigma, and making drug services more accessible. For example, going to the ER following an overdose, accessing needle exchange services to reduce the spread of bloodborne pathogens, and seeing a medical professional for help or support. Resistance to harm reduction stems from long-standing cultural beliefs and social stigma associated with drug use. Examples of harm reduction strategies are needle exchange, opioid substitution, drug education, drug testing, decriminalization, and legalization. And just a little saying here from Johann Hari, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it is human connection. So what does MDMA do in our body? What is that physiological response? Ecstasy and MDMA are typically taken orally. Ecstasy is a pressed pill taken by mouth or less commonly crushed and snorted. MDMA is a crystal powder in a gel capsule, usually taken or dropped orally. Less commonly can also be crushed and snorted or put in a water bottle, which is called M-water. When you hear somebody referring to parachuting, it's when the gel capsule is opened and crystals are shared by dosing out and wrapping it in tissue paper to be swallowed. Animal studies revealed that MDMA produces a rapid enhancement in the release of both serotonin and dopamine, as well as increased locomotor activity, which may be a reason for its popularity in dance cultures. MDMA users reported enhanced feelings of pleasure. One participant in a study described it as a constant pleasure 110% of the time. You just love everybody and cuddle everyone. To give us a better idea, I will show you another YouTube video on what MDMA's physiological responses in the body.
Your brain contains billions of cells. They consist of a cell body, dendrites, and an axon. The cell body stores DNA and other stuff. Dendrites receive signals from other cells, and the axon carries signals from the cell body to the axon terminals. Axon terminals contain neurotransmitters, which serve to communicate with other cells. Some cells contain just one type of neurotransmitter. Serotonin cells only produce and release serotonin. Serotonin cells release their serotonin into the synapse. This is the gap between their axon terminals and the dendrites of another cell. Serotonin is involved with the regulation of your mood, heart rate, sleep, and appetite. MDMA causes cells to release large amounts of serotonin. These large amounts are responsible for the primary effects of MDMA, such as euphoria, empathy, the urge to communicate, and mild hallucinations. Side effects are increased heart rate, difficulty sleeping, and loss of appetite. Serotonin is stored in vesicles that float around inside the axon terminals. When a signal comes down the axon, the vesicles merge with the membrane and release serotonin into the synapse. Released serotonin can enter a different cell through receptors that are attached to the membrane of dendrites. When serotonin attaches to such a receptor, the receptor sends information to the cell body. Based on the information from all the receptors together, the cell body will decide whether or not to send a signal down its own axon. When it does send a signal, more serotonin gets released into more synapses. After a while, the serotonin will detach from the receptor and float back into the synapse. Serotonin can also bind to reuptake transporters. Reuptake transporters work as a revolving door. After the serotonin enters, the transporter spins around and pushes the serotonin back into the axon terminal. Some serotonin makes its way back into the vesicles, but some of it gets broken down by an enzyme called monoamine oxidase. After 4 to 6 hours, you have used up most of your serotonin, and you should start to feel somewhat normal again. However, your low serotonin levels can make you feel depressed, extremely non-social, and tired. Your brain needs time to rebuild your serotonin levels. This could take up to 2 weeks. MDMA causes the release of serotonin by entering the axon terminal through the reuptake transporters. Once there, it interacts with the vesicle, causing it to pour serotonin into the synapse.
So short and long-term effects. Short-term psychological effects of MDMA include enhanced mood, euphoria, emotional empathy, and increased energy. Short-term physiological effects include muscle aches, nausea and vomiting, teeth grinding, hyperactivity, accelerated heart rate, increased temperature, sweating, and sleeplessness. Long-term psychological effects could include depression, memory deficits, and attention deficits. Long-term physiological effects could include sleep problems, high blood pressure, liver problems, and jaundice. Some differences between ecstasy and MDMA. MDMA is the main ingredient in ecstasy. It has been marketed and used under different names since the 80s, such as E, X, Happy Pill, Molly in the US, or Mandy in the UK. Ecstasy is usually mixed with adulterants to give it a pill shape. The mid to late 90s, lower levels of MDMA were observed in ecstasy pills. Sometimes analog substances, such as MDA, MDEA, were found instead. Amphetamine drug mixtures, such as caffeine or ephedrine or ketamine, were also found. Molly, or MDMA, is the supposedly purer form, usually taken in powder or crystal. Few studies have actually compared the degree of purity in ecstasy pills to that of MDMA crystals or powder. Reports showed adulterations in both forms, actually, despite some perceptions of MDMA as better or purer. So where do we see people using it? It's often seen at raves, EDM events, music festivals, house parties, college campuses, or bars. There's also been some evidence to show psychotherapeutic benefits as an adjunct to psychotherapy among those with PTSD and social anxiety. There was promising results of an Oken et al. 2013 and Amoroso and Workman in 2016 study that led the FDA to designate MDMA as a breakthrough drug in the treatment of PTSD, showing it had potential for MDMA to become actually a prescription drug. And here's another little video on the benefits of MDMA when combined with psychotherapy.
As a fully qualified transpersonal psychologist, George Sands, an alias, has conducted ecstasy therapy sessions for over 25 years.
It allows someone to be open to their own emotions. There is a loosening around the judgment that they have about themselves, about what has happened. There's a loosening around the shame. And so there's a room then to engage those memories or the experiences in a very different way.
I am so at peace inside right now that I feel like I'm sleeping. Oh, and I do. I feel like a huge weight has been lifted. Mm-hmm.
The MDMA induces an inner calm that helps patients confront memories and emotions that are too painful to deal with otherwise.
It has to be pure to be able to get this kind of response.
This is inner peace at its best, and outer peace, because I feel great.
During the 1960s and 70s, ecstasy was legally used in alternative therapy sessions, where it earned the nickname penicillin for the soul. But as the rave scene's use of ecstasy flourished, it led to a spate of casualties. Fear of the drug's potential health risks prompted a ban in 1985, despite protests from therapists across the globe. After 4 hours, the MDMA part of the session is over.
I just got the jitters and happiness going on. I feel like the weight of the world is off my shoulders for the first time in ever. Yeah.
The therapy helps Sue to see a way of moving out from under the shadow cast by the loss of her relative.
I couldn't help her, but I can help her kids. And she would thank me for that. Can't bring her back, but I can bring them forward. So, yeah, it was a good day for that. I didn't think I was going to get there, and I did.
Since 2000, the U.S. government has backed research into the use of MDMA in the treatment of soldiers with post-traumatic stress disorder. 80% of those treated seemed cured after only 2 sessions.
So, prevalence of MDMA use. How often are we actually seeing people use MDMA? Well, it was ranking among the top 5 substances used in the past year by Canadians. A self-reported study on the use of MDMA in Canada was taken in 2015. Students grades 7 to 12 reported 2.4% using in the past 12 months. Grade 7 to 9 was 0.7%. Grade 10 to 12, 4.0% reported using in the past 12 months. And youth aged 15 to 24 had the highest prevalence rate at 3.4% using in the past 12 months. Adults aged 25 and up were unable to report due to insufficient number of respondents. So this is an important statistic to consider. Adults were not willing to report their usage, likely due to the laws surrounding usage and perhaps stigma. This makes me think and consider the youth who also may not have reported for similar reasons. I take these statistics as self-reported evidence. However, also on the side of caution, as I think this may be slightly underreported for similar reasons that adults were not willing to report. MDMA in the media. Sensational news coverage can inaccurately sensationalize risks of usage of illicit substances such as MDMA, using misinformation to caution away from usage. I will take a moment now to show you 2 videos, one on news coverage that sensationalizes the risks, and one a Mad TV commercial that minimizes the risks.
There is a dangerous substance with an innocent-sounding name, bath salts. Police departments around this country are confronting a surge of people abusing the synthetic drug with horrifying consequences. The police have made videos of suspected users completely out of control. Here's ABC senior national correspondent Jim Avila.
This 19-year-old Florida boy was never charged with a crime, but police say he's under the influence of a cheap, widely available, supercharged speed, commonly called bath salts.
I think this kid was a normal kid walking around maybe the week before.
A potpourri of constantly changing chemicals that have nothing to do with your mother's actual bath products. Instead, these inexpensive synthetic drugs create a condition police have come to call excited delirium that makes users paranoid, violent, and unpredictable. Police suspect bath salts are behind the face-eating fatal attack on an innocent Miami man.
But you gotta chill out a minute.
And perhaps behind this growling suspect's unwillingness to surrender.
I've certainly heard about people with extraordinary strength, and we've seen that with PCP in the past.
Bath salts are actually closer to synthetic methamphetamine and cocaine, dramatically increasing dopamine levels in the human brain 2 dangerous ways: by pouring more dopamine in as meth does, and at the same time, like cocaine, trapping it in the brain so the user doesn't come down.
It would be like taking a very powerful methamphetamine and a very powerful cocaine at the same time.
Congress has been asked to ban the concoction, but can't agree on a bill. So the DEA issued a temporary ban that expires in just 6 months, an effort to protect police officers confronted by combative suspects high and strong beyond belief. Jim Avila, ABC News, Washington.
I will discuss the relationship between MDMA and bath salts here in a later slide. Here's the Mad TV commercial.
You feel a little tired lately, run down. You're not yourself. You're losing interest in the things you once loved. Your relationships are suffering. You feel antisocial. If this describes your life, there may be an answer. There may be help. A little pill called ecstasy. Ask your dealer if it's right for you. Ecstasy works by releasing a series of chemicals into your system, endorphins and serotonin.
Party, dude! Feel my skin. I think it's moving.
The endorphins bring on a sense of nirvana.
I think that tree was trying to tell me something. I know the bird was.
The serotonin allows you to feel a sense of bliss, lasting for hours on end.
What's your name? I love you. Oh, it's Mowgli.
Ecstasy is not for everyone. Side effects include paralysis, willingness to have sex with Margaret Cho, and listening to crappy techno music. Ecstasy is often made by community college dropouts in trailers or cockroach-infested bathrooms. Chronic use can lead to prolonged discussions with your socks, shoes, or other footwear. Occasionally, ecstasy can lead to death, or in severe cases, a tendency to waste votes on the Green Party.
So as you can see from the video, sensational news coverage can both exaggerate or understate the effects or consequences of trying MDMA. Popular media showed increasing visibility of MDMA as a party drug in mainstream television, movies, and music. This can serve to normalize the drug and introduce it to several new user groups over the last decade. For example, as within this Tyga music video.
Hi, I'm looking for Molly. I've been searching everywhere and I can't seem to find Molly.
Bands all of my dollars, I'm everywhere, it's popping. Can't fall in love, I got options. I'm high school, that's college. King Gold chains, that's Notre Dame. That green, yeah, I got it. I show up in the party, like where the fuck that Molly? OD, we're OGs. We don't fuck with no police. I'm too fly to be low key.
I think you get the point, so I'll stop it there. But here's an example of a little bit of a funnier one with the Bad Boy 2 movie clip.
Supple leather, you know. You ever rub your leather? You know, like just rub it, see how good it feels?
What does love mean to you, Mike?
Don't worry about me and my love. Look, I got plenty of love in my life.
Like a woman's butt.
Don't do that. Let's just concentrate and get this warrant.
I need to express right now. I want you to know if this is our last job, I really appreciate you. Okay? No, this is not gay shit. This is man shit. You know what I mean? Real stuff. And you're a beautiful man, you know? And when you can let the beautiful side. What?
Look at your pupils.
Well, how am I gonna look at my pupil? Well, do something.
What are you taking?
Right?
Did you take some of that X?
Hey, look, give me a hug.
Hey, listen. We need this warrant. Do not fuck this up. Pull yourself together.
Hold on.
Evening, Captain.
Hello. Captain Tio.
So how do you two plan to fuck up my evening tonight?
Well, Captain, believe me, we would not be here if it weren't seriously, utterly important.
Get in here.
Get on.
Oh, this is beautiful. Have such a warm feel, you know? Sort of like a Ben Schwartz. Was it Mike, when it was a V, like a Von
Why don't you have a seat?
Ben Rains or
Feng Shui.
Von Sway. You have a Von Sway.
Make yourself at home.
Captain, I know you said that Johnny Tapia was hands-on. No, Captain, we got him. It's a wrap. Look, we messed up today, but we got him. Please just look.
How do I move it?
Here, right with you can go flip through the pictures. You can flip through a picture.
This is horrible.
Take the picture.
Take a look really close, Cap. Listen, we got everything that we need to take this dude.
Oh, God. Oh.
They're taking the organs out. Right there. You can. Yeah. If you look, they're.
Oh gosh. Oh. Oh, what are we gonna do? Good. That's horrible. Look at this.
Everybody just needs to relax. Woosah.
What are you doing? Marcus, it's 2 a.m. Get your hands off me.
Oh, remember we said we were going to call Vargas and Reyes?
I
Call Vargas! Tell him the thing we said to tell him.
What thing?
Tell him we said we were about yesterday. Tell him about the thing. So, Captain, listen, we've also got videotape. Yesterday we fucked up bad, but we got him now. Oh, shit.
What?
No, a lot of times with these. Oh, shit.
With what?
No,
Did I raise it?
we got video. We got fucking.
Oh, let me see.
I don't know.
Oh, shit.
Captain, he's shipping the drugs around the country in dead bodies. We found coffins full of cash tagged for Cuba.
And you think Cappy's about to move out with all this money?
Well, I love it when you call me Bunny.
Shit.
Yeah, I do, girl. You should see this sexy shit I got on.
Who the hell are you talking to?
I talked to Vargas and Reyes. They said that they down for whatever. This is a nice fish, you know? Big fucking eyes, but a nice fucking fish.
We need this warrant, Captain.
But let's take this scumbag down. What the fuck is going on?
He ingested X.
You okay, pal? Take it easy.
So MDMA-related deaths are being reported as overdoses in the media or in the news. An overdose, it occurs when a toxic amount of a drug overwhelms the body. MDMA overdoses are actually very rare. Using the term overdose incorrectly in the media is misleading, given that MDMA-related deaths are seldom due to ingesting too high a dose of MDMA. Using the term overdose in the media obscures the root cause of fatalities. Obscuring the root cause of MDMA-related deaths inhibits treatment practitioners, prevention professionals, and harm reduction workers from understanding and implementing effective education and harm reduction messages. Prevalence of MDMA-related deaths. Canada has not been as good as other countries at tracking MDMA-related incidences, so we are currently unable to find stats on MDMA-related deaths in Canada. Even global rates are unclear due to a lack of data. However, I did find information for the United Kingdom and the United States. The UK data showed an increase in England and in Wales, 63 deaths in 2016. That was the highest number reported since 1993 when there was 12 deaths. There was an 8 times increase between 2010 and 2015 from 9 deaths to 76 deaths. The U.S. does not annually track MDMA-related deaths. However, the first death was believed to have occurred in 1987. The Drug Abuse Warning Network, or DAWN, was a national surveillance system that monitored emergency department visits involving drug use. It was discontinued in 2011. However, this warning network could be an idea for Canada to adapt, where we could use our emergency department records to help us to get an estimate of the problem. The next slide I will show are rates of the ER visits related to MDMA deaths. The data was reported by Riggs and Sharp, and I made the graph. The graph shows the number of individuals admitted in the U.S. between 1994 and 2011 to the ER with MDMA-related incidences. So this isn't necessarily deaths, just MDMA-related incidences. In 1994, there was 250 emergency room visits related to MDMA, a gradual increase yearly up until 1999, where there was an exponential increase to 2,850 incidences. In 2005, there was 4,460 incidences. And finally, in 2011, there was 10,176 emergency room visits related to MDMA. This is when the program was cut off. If we could use a similar tracking system in Canada and gain statistics related to MDMA use and its stress on our emergency department, perhaps it would be easier to gain funding and address the issue. So what are some of the factors that contribute to MDMA-related deaths? Beyond some of these scary statistics, let's talk about what we can do about it. Starting with the factors that contribute to MDMA-related deaths, even if the deaths are rare. One being the declining price in both pill and powder or crystal form. It has dropped drastically over the last 2 decades. In the 1990s, the reported price was between $10 to $20 per cap or pill. In 2002, it was $8 US, and in 2010, $6 US. The second factor I'd like to discuss that's related to MDMA-related deaths is the unpredictable quality, such as the varying potency and the use of cheaper additives which tend to be more toxic to turn a profit. For example, MDA, pentalone, N-ethylene pentalone, and PMA. The unpredictable quality means that users are unable to accurately dose or gauge their MDMA content due to the presence of other potentially harmful adulterants. It is important for users to know their source. So what are some of the risks associated with MDMA use? First, I'd like to say that regular use of illicit substances is generally a transient phenomenon during early adulthood, which underscores the importance of interventions appropriately targeted for this age group. However, the research does show that some of the risks associated with MDMA include mental health disorders such as depression, anxiety, and panic attacks, sexual risk-taking with one-night stands and inconsistent condom use, neuropsychiatric consequences with damage in the brain, adverse physiological effects such as seizures, arrhythmias, hyperthermia, and hyponatremia. I will speak to hyperthermia and hyponatremia in the following slides. There are also fatal drug interactions we should be aware of, such as with moclobemide and antiretroviral medications. Moclobemide is an MAOI inhibitor used to treat depression and social anxiety. Antiretroviral medications are commonly prescribed to patients with human immunodeficiency virus or HIV. Patients on antiretroviral medications may not be able to adequately metabolize MDMA, which can lead to lethal toxicity levels from relatively low doses of the drug. Antiretrovirals are inhibitors of CYP2D6, an enzyme involved in the metabolism of psychoactive drugs, including MDMA. Death, although rare, is a risk secondary to the above factors. I will specifically speak to hyperthermia and hyponatremia in the following slides. Hyperthermia is the brain's inability to thermoregulate, leading to elevations in body temperature. The pharmacological properties of MDMA makes its users susceptible to overheating, the impact of which is amplified by ambient temperature and physical exertion. The 3 stages of hyperthermia are heat cramps, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke. Heat cramps are brief, intense, severe cramping occurring in large muscle groups fatigued by dancing for long periods of time, usually occurs while resting. Treatment, well, the cramps do resolve rapidly with rest and oral replacement of sodium and water. You can use elevation, gentle massage, and analgesics to manage the pain. The person should also avoid strenuous activity for the following 12 hours. Harm reduction messaging could include encouraging the use of sport drinks such as Gatorade, which is an electrolyte solution to help prevent the cramping. Heat exhaustion is when the body temperature increases to 37.8 to 40 degrees Celsius. It is characterized by fatigue, lightheadedness, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and sensations of impending doom. Hypotension and severe temperature increases are caused by dehydration. The person may have dilated pupils for reasons beyond MDMA, but because of the heat exhaustion. They may appear confused and irritable, have pale or ashy skin, and be profusely sweating and weak. Treatment would include going to a cool area and, if appropriate, removing restrictive clothing. Stay with the person and watch the airway, breathing, and circulation, or the ABCs. If they get worse, they may need to go to the hospital for further treatment. Heat stroke is when the body temperature increases to above 40 degrees Celsius and is considered a medical emergency, so call an ambulance. The person will have altered mentation, displaying a range of neurological symptoms from aggression to hallucinations. They'll have the absence of perspiration on their skin and will feel dry and hot to the touch. They will be pale or ashen, and they will appear uncoordinated. If unmanaged, it can lead to cerebral edema and decreased blood flow to the brain. Treatment that you could implement while waiting for the ambulance would include focusing on reducing the person's core temperature, removing the person's clothing if appropriate, and covering the person with wet, cool sheets, the use of a fan and ice to decrease the body temperature to at least 38.9. Complications of hyperthermia include renal failure and brain edema, these being the leading cause of MDMA-related deaths and non-fatal incidences. Hyponatremia can result from loss of sodium-containing fluids or from excess water. This condition causes extracellular hypoosmolarity with a shift of water into the cells. Hyponatremia develops as the body responds to the fluid volume deficit due to profuse sweating, with activation of the thirst mechanism, and by releasing ADH, or antidiuretic hormone, aka vasopressin, which regulates urination. MDMA causes the brain to secrete ADH, or that antidiuretic hormone, that tells the body to retain water. The situation becomes compound when users simultaneously drink large amounts in an effort to stay hydrated. The retention of water combined with drinking at a high rate can lead to toxic levels that result in hyponatremia and contribute to MDMA-related incidences. The danger of drinking too much water is that users retain this water, specifically affecting their brain cells, causing primary bodily functions to fail, such as breathing and heartbeat. Women specifically may be more prone to hyponatremia. Novel psychoactive substances, or from here on out I'll be calling NPS. They are also called synthetic cathinones, analogs, adulterants, and bath salts. They are neither new nor are they novel. They are a drug analog representing minor chemical changes to an existing drug molecule to rebrand a familiar substance or circumvent legal prohibition. They were first synthesized decades ago in 1928 and are experiencing a resurgence in use. They were introduced as over-the-counter drugs, posing as shoe deodorizers, plant foods, or bath salts. Hence, bath salts has become a catch-all phrase for NPS, or synthetic cathinones. They can be purchased through the dark web and paid for with cryptocurrencies or Bitcoin. They have many, many names. Blue Sky, Cloud9, Red Dragon, White Dove, Cookie Dough, Green Magic, Blue, Psycho, Charlie Sheen, and many, many more. MDMA or ecstasy are made in illegal labs, often with a number of different chemicals that may or may not contain MDMA in varying amounts. Active ingredients found in Molly in Canada between 2016 and 2017 included synthetic cathinones or bath salts, such as ethylone, methylene dioxyamphetamine or MDA, and its precursor MMDPPA, which I'm not going to attempt to say. PMA or paramethoxyamphetamine, a common adulterant, is sometimes used in lieu of MDMA because it causes the stimulation of the central nervous system and provides hallucinogenic effects. But not much is known about PMA's effects on humans. PMA is on the Schedule I list of Controlled Substances Act. Human research has been conducted only sparingly. Some findings suggest that dosages of PMA as low as 0.5 milligrams can be toxic and cause death. Between 2011 and 2012, PMMA, paramethoxymethamphetamine, was present in pills sold as ecstasy in Canada. It resulted in the death of 27 individuals in Alberta and BC over an 11-month period. Note the picture to the left and how similar all the white powders can look. Similar to fentanyl, these substances are difficult for the average person to detect and require lab testing to know if you are taking MDMA or an analog of something that is made to mimic MDMA. This is important for people when they are considering how much to take. There are widely different effects and dosages for different analogs. there has been a high risk of adverse experiences. Reports of episodes of rage, violence, extreme paranoia, expressed fears of own capacity for violence. Participants in a 2008 study by Elliott et al. Described analogs as a viable replacement for crack cocaine, methamphetamine, and heroin. There was grounds for pharmacological research into new maintenance medications or lower harm alternatives to crack cocaine, methamphetamine in particular. Correct dosing can have short-term effects similar to MDMA, euphoria, increased energy, increased heart rate, blood pressure, and sweating. Potential harm reduction interventions should target dealers to use chemical names, specifically like MDA, MDPV, PPM, etc., to allow individuals to better research effects, dosages, and contraindications online. A second harm reduction strategy should work to destigmatize NPS through education on risks or harms related to their use, debunking sensational mythology of violence and death, and having accessible resources for testing of NPSs, for safer dosing, and to avoid adverse physical and psychological events. So legislation of NPS, or legislation of novel psychoactive substances. One of the reasons we see a rise in NPS is to avoid prosecution for using drugs on the list of Schedule I substances. Scholars warn against the enactment of prohibition on NPS and blanket sanctions, claiming it will lead to a chemical arms race where contemporary drug labs produce seemingly endless alterations on an illicit molecule. Gray market chemists rapidly develop new substances as substitutes for those lost and expedited to prohibition, resulting in potential confusion and harm for consumers who are poorly informed about the changing formulation of the generically marketed substances. Banning of substances that might be harmful leads to the introduction of new analogs that genuinely are harmful when not used correctly. Polysubstance use is the use of multiple substances within a specific time frame, and includes the use of analogs to mimic the effects of stimulants or psychedelics. A minority of event attendees will engage in polysubstance use. It increases the risk of adverse events, and harm reduction messaging should encourage avoiding the combination of stimulants, education on interactions, and promote self-care. The majority of event attendees will limit their use to a single substance. So different polysubstance use patterns. The more common combinations when it comes to polysubstance use was either under one of two categories, stimulants or psychedelics. So when polysubstance use was occurring, according to one study, it was the combination of stimulants such as amphetamines, cocaine, and marijuana, or the second category being psychedelics, which would be the combination of LSD, mushrooms, and ecstasy or MDMA. However, it is important to point out that MDMA and ecstasy are actually a stimulant, not a psychedelic. Different polysubstance use patterns are likely to have different effects on users' health, and thus may require different forms of prevention to minimize such risks. The category of people who engage in stimulant polysubstance use with amphetamines, cocaine, and marijuana tends to be a more mainstream drug user group. Use of marijuana and benzos to counteract the effect of stimulants is common. Harm reduction messaging should work to reduce the risk of combining stimulants and depressants. Those that engage in the psychedelic category, which was a higher percentage, reported that type of use, were also more likely to use novel psychoactive substances or analogs. Some harm reduction messaging for individuals. Well, many users employ strategies to reduce risks associated with MDMA. They know their source, they buy from a regular dealer, they understand the risks of buying from an unknown dealer, they go slow, they start low, they're not daft, they start with half. They use only after others have tried some from the same batch, they only use with trusted friends. We could also add that they should have a way to get home or have a plan, a meeting spot with friends, make sure their phone's fully charged, a bit of extra cash you don't plan to spend in case of an emergency, taking care of the body by eating in advance, safer routes of consumption, such as eating or M water being the safest, snorting less safe, and injecting the riskiest. We could recommend individuals do their research. A harm reduction site I found specifically on MDMA was rollsafe.org, or How to Take MDMA. Sesh Safety is a Facebook harm reduction group I found that seems to use educated and informed individuals. And it is a harm reduction messaging group, so it isn't about bragging or boasting. It's, yeah, you know what? I'll let you see for yourself, and I'll take a moment to show it to you now. Sesh Safety, a harm reduction community as featured on Vice. It is a closed group. This is a backup right now. The groups are constantly changing because they're getting shut down when people don't follow the rules. But this is an example of what it's like. It's not just MDMA related, it's all drug related. So this one here, it's talking about Xanax that's being circulated that contains opioids, or does it say there? Or something like that. Sometimes people ask you to be part of different documentaries, such as with that post. Talking about a rave there. This person's talking about combining speed, MDMA, and coke. Any new, see, yeah, just direct to the new one because they're looking for people to reconfirm with the agreement that they made when they joined the group. Another warning about Percocets with fentanyl in it. Well, here's one related to Molly. Does anyone else here have trouble sleeping after taking Molly? I can rarely sleep at night, even if I take it early in the afternoon. Wondering if anyone has any tips so that I could help get a little bit of shut-eye. So then anybody can comment on it. Ecstasy and sleep don't really go, mate. Time and water, lots of time and plenty of water. It's a stimulant. They're trouble sleeping. Best thing to do is water and try. Sean McDonald. So he's one of the admins on here. I have seen him respond to previous posts. What's your previous MDMA use? Like, those with tolerance to the stuff can be kept stimulated due to generally dosing higher and not reaping as much of the serotogenic component. Stopping earlier is generally your best. Or don't redose. Generally speaking, MDMA puts me and many others to sleep once it's run its course. Never take stupid amounts. Are you testing it? Consuming alcohol with it? Very possible, just an individual reaction. It's not unheard of. The only variables I think would be dose, tolerance, and other drugs or adulterants. If you can rule those three out, then the problem is probably you and just how you're naturally predisposed, not the external factors. Are you medicated in any other manner? I suppose that would be the other potential. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's also people with personal experience. I'm not saying that we should necessarily always direct our clients to something like this. However, it could be a harm reduction strategy to consider, especially for if Streetworks wanted to make something like that, where they had a Facebook group that people could come on and discuss like their different situations. Hey, I took some fentanyl and this is what happened to a friend of mine, and yeah, that kind of thing, and where people could share their own stories and maybe have experts of the overdose prevention team or something go in and provide education and build and things like that. So another harm reduction strategy for individuals would be to encourage hydration, but to avoid hyponatremia. So don't consume water in excess. 2 cups per hour when dancing is the recommendation. Remind attendees to drink water slowly, and if necessary, supplement with minerals, salty snacks, juice, or a sports drink. Discourage using alcohol or soda as a means to staying hydrated due to their high sugar content, caffeine, and or the diuretic properties. Harm reduction at music festivals or raves. Conditions at raves put attendees at risk for hyperthermia, such as overcrowding, high ambient temperatures, poor access to water, rigorous dancing, and excessive perspiration. The Reducing America's Vulnerability to Ecstasy Act was renamed the Illicit Drug Anti-Proliferation Act. The purpose of this act was to curb MDMA and other drug use at raves by levying huge fines on organizers who profit from events where they knew drug use would be present. This led many organizers to stop providing safety precautions out of fear that their efforts would be seen as acknowledging or encouraging drug use. Under this law, organizers could be fined as much as $250,000 or be imprisoned for 20 years. This approach to drug use is clearly counterproductive. Some harm reduction messaging for venues should include providing a safe setting. Event producers follow detailed procedures and event safety standards set by fire departments, licensing, permitting agencies, and industry groups such as the Event Safety Alliance. However, alcohol and other drug use adds additional risk. These procedures and standards do not usually take into account. Access to drinking water should not simply be preferred. Alcohol and many other drugs cause dehydration. Limited access to drinking water puts attendees at risks. A chill-out area where the event layout should have a designated space away from the stages where patrons can comfortably sit to allow for rest and recovery. Substance use can increase heart rate and raise body temperature, so having an area where people can go to sit down and cool off would be above and beyond, especially if it included cooling fans. Taking actions like these will greatly reduce the incidence of medical emergencies, hospitalizations, and deaths. Harm reduction for music festivals and raves should include the expansion of pill testing services. Many MDMA-related deaths and incidences are the result of unknowingly ingesting harmful adulterants or more dangerous MDMA analogs. Pill testing services provides drug checking or adulterant screening. It's not foolproof. For example, they do have false positives or false negatives. However, it does still directly address the inability to determine the purity and potency of drugs sold as ecstasy and Molly. Effective risk reduction measures because it alerts users prior to ingestion to the presence of contaminants that might result in a MDMA-related death or adverse event. This may not stop the individual from taking the substance, but we can use this as an opportunity to educate the individual on safer dosing and potential risks. Results should be shared with other patrons. Sometimes this is displayed as a board, others can come and read, but also with medical and mental health workers, hospitals, and law enforcement to educate them about local trends and potentially harmful combinations. So this is a picture of the harm reduction tent at Shambhala, where they do drug testing and they post the results for everyone to come and read. There are 3 types of pill testing: on-site services, personal test kits, and lab testing. So on-site services are usually provided by a third party. Typically, testing takes part in a tent or a kiosk outside of the venue. It is a simple litmus test and is used to indicate the presence of potentially harmful adulterants and cutting agents. It's either positive or negative, and it's offered by organizations such as DanceSafe. Indigo is currently advocating for an FTIR spectrometer. This is the same machine used by Anchor at Shambhala. Personal test kits can be purchased online through Amazon or eBay, and it enables MDMA users to test the purity in the privacy of their own home. An example of one of these test kits is the Marquise Reagent Testing Kit. It uses sulfuric acid and formaldehyde to test for certain compounds. It turns various colors to signal the presence of a potentially harmful contaminant, as well as MDMA. One kit, which is good for about 50 tests, can be purchased for approximately $20 and is usually delivered in a discreet and unmarked box. Lab testing is when pills can be sent anonymously to a lab for testing. For example, with ecstasy.org, it's based out of Sacramento, California, and it is an independent laboratory testing program that provides anonymous testing in a Drug Enforcement Administration licensed laboratory. When I searched it quickly over Google, this did look like a viable option. However, before recommending it to clients, I would advise testing the service for ourselves just to be better and have a better understanding of the processes, risks, and costs. Results of the test usually posted online and made public so that other MDMA users in the local area who have purchased pills from the same batch can benefit from the information. The results are also made public to inform harm reduction workers, medical personnel, and researchers in their efforts to keep users safe. The website above I found when looking, there is a cost to their service. I believe it's $40 per pill, and something to consider and check out further. So I just brought it up quickly so we can look at it. $40 a pill or $100 for recreational powder or blotters. It could get quite pricey. So if we wanted to see what the results look like, just beyond sending anything in, this is what has been tested as of recently, and it's from all over the world. So I wonder if we could find anything from Canada. Just take a quick minute to scroll through. Oh, there's one from Canada, MDA. It's not being sold as ecstasy, so that's good. Shows you that right there. I don't necessarily want to scroll through all of it, but I do think that it's a good resource to have and to be able to look at maybe once in a while, to be familiar with. Being sold as cocaine, but it also contained norcocaine, so maybe that's something that people could look into. Molly being sold as Molly, so that's good. There you go. But there's different information. It's just another resource for us to consider when we're educating our clients, or even just when we want to know what's out there and what's being adulterated and what's not. Music festivals and rave events should have medical services, on-site advanced medical services, where medical personnel have music festival experience. They should be trained on the variety of drugs used in party settings and their effects. I would further add with de-escalation and trauma-informed care. Support services for medical personnel should be available for them to refer to, such as a mental health area or a sanctuary, drug testing and harm reduction, access to free drinking water, and the use of outreach workers. It should include mental health services. Medical personnel are often asked to handle patrons requiring mental health support services, incorporating and pairing trained mental health counselors, therapists, or peers with individuals experiencing a mental health crisis, having a safe space separate from but located near the medical area, where peer-to-peer outreach services is an effective evidence-based practice that would be able to act as a mediator between professionals and attendees. Mental health services enables medical teams to provide critical care for those who actually need it. It also reduces unnecessary hospital transfers, arrests, and potentially additional trauma to patrons having difficulties. Examples of common mental health crises experienced at raves are someone who has drank too much and has become lost or separated from their friends, someone who has taken a psychedelic drug and may be disoriented or experiencing emotional crises. So, risk management and enforcement. Here I will take an opportunity to show you my last video.
Oh shit! Oh shit! Holy shit! Tissue, man, tissue. Can you eat it? The whole bag? Fuck it! Hey, Mike, while you're at it, look at your shoes, dude! Come on, man, just eat it. Mike, I hate to ask, but, ain't that? For the team? No, fall off the window! Okay. Alright, I'm doing it, John. I'm gonna go, I'm going. No. It's going. It's going. Alright, let's go. We're dead. Alright. Windows down. Come on, there must have been like a double homicide or something fucking cool. Oh man, my always have a heart attack. Mike, you didn't eat both those bags, did you? Oh, get it! You must be eating like $100 worth of pot and like $30 worth of shrooms, man. So I'm gonna need that $130, whenever you get a chance. Fuck, man.
That's not really cool, man. Is that the same car, man? Do I look high?
Yeah.
So alcohol and stimulants do increase the risk of aggressive behavior. However, when used together, alcohol and stimulants can also mask impairment of psychomotor functioning. They may appear sober when they're not slurring or stumbling. They seem to be fairly well coordinated, which could lead to risky behaviors such as drunk driving. Risky because as the substances wear off at different rates, the individual may find themselves quite drunk. Consequently, this may increase their likelihood of police contact. Police contact could lead to ticketing or arrests, intoxication in a public place, possession of illicit drugs or paraphernalia, antisocial behavior, and driving under the influence. We need police presence to hold an event and keep attendees safe. However, their presence also increases the risks of overdose and death. Attendees carrying drugs may resort to consuming their entire quantity at once to avoid detection, as in that Super Troopers video. It may lead them to purchasing at the event. Research indicates police presence may encourage people to purchase drugs within the festival to avoid detection. Police often search attendees as they enter the festival, and attendees may purchase drugs from unknown suppliers and may be at risk for purchasing adulterated drugs. Attendees may avoid harm reduction services for fear of being on the cops' radar when accessing those services. Police can discourage attendees from coming in contact with harm reduction due to fear or anxiety regarding disclosing their substance use. Enforcement, which is the drug law enforcement at events. It's a complicated situation because police must enforce the law, but arrests do not prevent the majority of use or even sales. A drug arrest can have devastating long-term consequences, negatively impacting an individual's ability to keep or gain employment, housing, or financial aid. Increased risk of overdose, strong emphasis on the enforcement can often lead to patrons consuming all their drugs before entry, which is a dangerous practice. We could suggest the use of amnesty bins to counteract this. Events that make use of amnesty bins, where attendees have the option to surrender their drug before entry, are a step in the right direction. Applying this philosophy at the point of entry searches, where if a substance is found, the person has the option to surrender it, rather than facing ejection or arrest. Keeps event producers in compliance with the law, and places the emphasis on patrons' health, and allows enforcement to focus instead on stopping violent or dangerous behavior. Police contact can have a positive impact too. A study by Leslie et al. In 2018 suggested that police contact among some young adults using recreational drugs can have a positive impact on perceptions of police and policing, particularly when police are perceived to act in a positive manner. For example, being friendly, respectful, and professional. Some harm reduction should focus on education for police and de-escalation. So we're coming to the end here, and my last slide is just here to show you some of the relationships or collaboration that we could use with raves or EDM, organizations that have experience advocating for and implementing drug use, management, best practices, and would be happy to facilitate new relationships or help build on existing relationships. Dance Safe is a public health organization promoting health and safety within the nightlife and electronic music communities. It provides peer-to-peer outreach services to distribute free water, earplugs, sunscreen, and drug and sexual health resources, in addition to drug checking services when it's feasible. The DPA, or the Drug Policy Alliance, is the nation's leading organization to promoting drug policies that are grounded in science, compassion, health, and human rights. The DPA advocates for expansion of drug education and harm reduction, as well as policy changes that will protect both party goers and event producers. The Zenato Project is an on-site harm reduction service providing compassionate care and education for individuals having difficult psychedelic experiences, and it is based out of Burning Man. I also included Indigo and Anchors. Indigo is our local Edmonton harm reduction group that you'll find at a lot of EDM events, and Anchors is the harm reduction group within Shambhala. Well, thank you for your guys' time today. I hope you have learned something, and if you have any questions, please feel free to email me or to look it up in any of the following resources here.